convidamos para virmos não só partilhar as nossas experiências, mas também para aprendermos com aqueles que têm o tempo para pensar em várias vertentes, em vários paradigmas, sobre o que é que exatamente está a acontecer em Cabo Delgado. Não irei dizer qual é o raciocínio da Agência de Desenvolvimento Integrado do Norte em relação a quais são os problemas, porque senão estaria a trazer a maneira nossa de raciocinar. Gostaria de, ao longo do tempo destes debates, poder aprender e, se calhar, depois partilharmos a maneira como estamos a ver o problema. Tratando-se de nota de introdução e do início, gostaria de, mais uma vez, agradecer pelo convite e que estamos prontos para interagir e engajar em diferentes temas que aqui serão aflorados. Obrigado.
Muito obrigada, Sua Excelência, professor Dr. João Machatini, que é coordenador da Unidade de Gestão de Programas de Comunicação e Assuntos Transversais da ADINE. Gostava também de convidar para notas de abertura Sua Excelência Siposami Malunga, diretor da Open Society Initiative for Southern Africa, OCISA.
Thank you so much. I'm very privileged to be here. It is not my first time to be in Mozambique. Those of you who have been here before with me in several meetings will know that I am actually home here. I know that not just in Africa, but in Europe, when you open your mouth to say something, people always say, "Who are you?" People always ask, "So who are you? Who are you to speak? What right do you have to say anything about anything?" I feel very entitled to say something about Mozambique. It is my country. My grandfather left this country when he was about 20 years old. I'm told, he was a legend. He already had 3 wives. He had 3 wives, and he had about 6 children. For a 20-something-year-old young man, that's quite an achievement. He crossed the border to Zimbabwe, and he went and worked in the mines in Zimbabwe, in the southern part of Zimbabwe, as a gold miner. And he never came back to Mozambique. He found my grandmother there and married her, and had my father, who in a very young age became a student of our former president, the late Robert Mugabe, and the late George Slundiga. And my father became a protege of these 2 luminary nationalists. And he joined the struggle. And for his pains, spent almost 20 years in prison. And became a national hero in Zimbabwe. So he fought for independence. My father never came here. This is the most amazing thing, right? He is buried in the national heroes in Zimbabwe, but he is actually from here. So I feel entitled to speak. It's not even many generations away. I am a Zimbabwean. I live in South Africa. I'm also a South African. I'm also a Mozambican. So I feel entitled to speak. I just have to say this as a starting point. Because people say, well, why? Who are you? Where are you? Why are you doing this? And I'm very happy that the general opened us up. For a long time, for some of us who are working in what you'd call civil society, we're very angry with our governments in SADC. We kept saying, why? Why are you not going and supporting our brothers in Mozambique? And I was so delighted when SADC took the decision. Of course, at the invitation of the government, we all understand. And I was so delighted when the government said, well, let's talk, we need your support here. We all rejoiced because we understood that perhaps finally something might happen that might advance the resolution of the conflict. We have been so delighted to see, and Professor just spoke now, Mashatin, that the government has made significant investments in addressing this crisis in Cabo Delgado. This is absolutely important news for us because we feel helpless as Africans out there when we hear about the casualties, when we hear about the crisis, the humanitarian crisis in any part of our continent. You saw, and I have to say this because sometimes it's good to talk about these things as an African, you saw how Europe responded to Ukraine. I mean, Europe didn't wait a month, 3 months. Europe just said, well, forgetting the ideological issues, I'm not here to discuss ideological issues around the conflict in Ukraine, but the reality is that it is important that we, as Africans, respond in a different way to each other's problems. And we see each other's problems as our own. There are many important lessons from our own continent. I have no expertise on Cabo Delgado, so I will not try to pretend I know, do this, you need to do that, the experts are here, the report is there. But I am a student of history. And I do know that solidarity is the fuel of any struggle. The liberation of my country, Zimbabwe, and my country, Mozambique, and my country, South Africa, was achieved through solidarity of other African people, and of course, people beyond Africa. And so speaking as an African, I would say that the solidarity must continue. The effort to find solutions in Mozambique, the support must continue. And that is why in our role, in my role, in the organization I'm at, because people will wonder, how did you have this interest in working with Adriano, CDD? We saw the need to support. I was there in Johannesburg, but we saw the need. We said, oh, Adriano, what can we do? No, we want to do this, we want to go to Cabo Delgado. We want to facilitate discussions and dialogue. No, maybe we can engage and support you on this. But there are many other lessons. And as General Nyanda said earlier, His Excellency, there's always two sides to a story, right? Never one side. We now know there are people. We now know that people have faces. For a long time, there was their side and the government side. But we all know that wherever you go, there's always two sides. Sometimes there's even three sides. The second is that, and this is almost an adage, it's a cliche, the first casualty of war is truth. Whether you are in Ukraine, whether you are in Mali, whether you are in Burkina Faso, the first casualty, or in Sudan, or in Ethiopia, the first casualty of war is always truth. But it is initiatives like CDDs that helps us unpack, understand a little bit more what is actually going on. And there are always many truths, right? There is no one truth. There are many truths. If you ask someone in Cabo Delgado, they will tell you what the cause of the conflict is. If you ask somebody else, if you ask somebody in Maputo, they will tell you something different. If you ask two different people in Cabo Delgado, they might tell you different things about what the cause of the conflict is. And it is initiatives such as the one by CDD that helps us appreciate and understand the multiplicity of perspectives and views about any problems we have in society. Because until and unless you know that a problem has many perspectives and views, you cannot resolve it. Because you are simply thinking about your own perspective of a problem. The third point, and we know this to be true, because our countries were born out of guerrilla warfare, right? We are now in control of our countries. We have governments. We now control the formal armed forces. But we won our countries through guerrilla warfare. You have to understand this. This is a very important point. Winning is relative. Winning is relative. You can win by not losing. We know this to be true. There was absolutely no way our brothers in MK could have overrun Pretoria and gone to the union buildings and taken it over. But they won that war a long time ago by not being defeated. Same thing with Zipra, Zanla, same thing with Frelimo. And these are important lessons. We must think about this. Winning, you can win by not losing, and you can lose by not winning. That's how the apartheid regime lost. That's how Ian Smith lost. That's how the Portuguese lost. Every single day that they failed to defeat these guerrillas that they said were terrorists, they lost. They lost public sentiment, they lost support, they lost control of the narrative, they lost many things. And this is why I'm so happy about the initiatives such as the one by Dr. Mashatin, that you are now taking the responsibility to win, not just, and I'll come to the next one, to win not just the war, but to secure the peace. There's a huge difference. It is not very difficult if you have the firepower, you have the men on the ground. I'm not a military man, but I've read a lot about military strategy. It is not impossible if you have the means and the equipment and the skills and the strategy to defeat your enemy. But you must be sure that the day you defeat your enemy, you must have a strategy to keep him defeated. Because it's another thing to defeat an enemy, it's another thing to keep him defeated. And for me, this is part of what we are hearing from the report, that you need a strategy to keep and secure the peace. It is not a military solution. And we know this to be true. And the last point is the dichotomy between the symptom and the disease. It has become very apparent over the years that, as we have been told by Dr. Mashatin, by General, His Excellency, that not everything is what it seems. It is very clear that there are genuine underlying grievances. They're there. The grievances are there. It is important not to cure the symptom, because the symptom doesn't resolve what is inside you. It is important to cure the disease. The symptom will come and go, and the symptom will change. And this is a very fundamental and very important point. And I'm saying this in the most general of terms. And the last point, as I leave, is that because we must situate what's happening now in the global context again. We cannot spare even a minute to resolve the crisis in Cabo Delgado. We cannot spare a minute. Why? We know people will tell you their external interests, there are people who want the minerals, who want the gas, who want this. That's all very true. I'm not even talking about the Americans, the French, and all the other people who are heavily invested in. I'm talking about Mozambique, I'm talking about Africa. Africa last night I was talking with some friends, is there a windfall for Africa from Ukraine? Is there a windfall? Because everybody wants the minerals in Africa, right? Now we've got our oil, everybody wants it. And then I remember that last week I was reading that unfortunately for us, we pump our oil and we send it out and we buy it back at a premium. Any day longer that the crisis and the conflict in Cabo Delgado is not resolved is a loss for Mozambique. A huge loss in economic terms. We already know the loss in life, in humanitarian terms. It's a loss for Africa. It's a loss for our region. Mozambique is the place where it's the most energy productive, well, with Angola as well. And we want this energy, we want the gas in our region. So, doctor, for us, this is a matter of life and death, that you resolve this crisis so that we can benefit from this important resource that we need in our region. I'm going to end here and just by thanking once again the organizers for inviting me and paying tribute to all the wonderful work that has been done, including by our SADC, and of course, reaffirming and insisting once again that to win the war, you really must secure the peace. And that's the most important thing that we need to focus on. Thank you so much.
E mesmo para fecharmos aqui esta parte de notas de abertura, gostava de convidar a Sua Excelência Dr. Chris Maroleng, que é diretor executivo da Good Governance África.
Your Excellency, the Ambassador of South Africa to Mozambique, Mr. Sipiwe Nyanda, Dr. João Mashatini, Siposami Malunga. Thank you very much for your contributions today. They have really set a tone for the debate that we'll be having here. But before I begin, let me start off also by thanking our partner, the CDD, for the great work that they've done in setting and creating a context for the understanding of the conflict that has occurred in Cabo Delgado. Had it not been for the contextual positioning of the situation in Cabo Delgado, I think there would have been much misunderstanding about what the drivers and the causes of the violent extremisms that we have seen breaking out in northern Mozambique are. In this regard, let me also give you a sense of how we as Good Governance Africa begin to understand the conflict in northern Mozambique. Good Governance Africa, or GGA, is an organization, a think tank, that is focused on understanding what the challenges and the benefits of good and effective governance is across the African continent. Why do I mention this? I mention this because it is, in our view, one of the, or rather it is in our view, the fact that there has been deficits in governance in Mozambique that have created or caused grievances that now have resulted in the situation that we see, where we see these violent extremists resorting to the use of violence to ultimately resolve what they believe have been key grievances. Having said this, one of the things that we believe, and it was also pointed out by General Nyanda, is that there's a need to engage, and that a military solution, even though it can create the preconditions for engagement, cannot be ultimately the key approach to resolving this crisis. It is our view, and indeed, it is indeed a position that has been demonstrated by the speakers who have spoken before me, that it is necessary for us to find engagement and ultimately a resolution of this conflict through dialogue. One of the key aspects that was also pointed out by our colleague Siposami Malunga is the fact that solidarity and engagement, or rather regional engagement, can result in the resolution of this crisis by assisting the various parties to capacitate not just the military solution that we believe might have culminated, but ultimately the dialogue that we believe, as Mr. Malunga said, will help us win the peace in northern Cabo Delgado. I think ultimately what I will conclude by saying is that we believe, as Good Governance Africa, through our partnership with CDD, that we are well positioned through, as a regional-based civil society, to begin to be part of the solution in assisting the Mozambican government, the Southern African Development Community, and other partners who have been thoroughly engaged in trying to resolve this crisis to find a peaceful resolution to the conflict in northern Cabo Delgado. With these few words, let me end by saying that I look forward to hearing the discussions that will occur today, in the hope that we'll get a better understanding of what some of the possible solutions are to resolving the crisis in northern Mozambique. I thank you very much.
Muito obrigada, Sua Excelência Dr. Chris Marolin, que é diretor executivo da Good Governance Africa. E agora vamos para a segunda parte, depois das notas de abertura, e para falar ou fazer aqui uma apresentação sobre o extremismo violento no norte de Moçambique, avaliando a situação de dezembro de 2021 a maio de 2022, gostava de convidar o conselheiro do Centro para a Democracia e Desenvolvimento, Dr. Richard Rand.
Excellency, excuse me, Excellency, members of the government and security forces, members of the diplomatic community, international community, and most importantly, Mozambicans and friends of Mozambique. Thank you. Those of you that know me will know that I like to speak from a microphone, so I can wander around a little bit and keep your attention. All of you can remove your headsets, because today I am very fortunate to have possibly the best interpreter translator that you can find in Mozambique. Certainly from my perspective, because perhaps she understands a little bit about where I'm coming from. Would you like to stand up? So my role today is to literally reinforce everything that our guest speakers, our keynote speaker, His Excellency, the responder, Mr. Chris, have already said. But I'm going to do it from a technical perspective. I want to try and reinforce some of the aspects that they have already commented on, but from a technical perspective.
O meu papel hoje é reforçar todas as mensagens que os demais oradores já explicaram, mas vou fazê-lo do ponto de vista puramente técnico e entrar nos detalhes.
So we've talked about how to resolve conflict. There's been many words said, there's been many approaches that we've discussed in the past. So the first thing that I wanted to do today was to try and measure success so far in terms of resolving conflict.
Há várias formas de analisar este conflito e o que vamos aqui analisar são as várias formas de medir o ponto de situação e como olhar para o conflito.
So rather than dissecting each individual event, success or failure, I want to try and take it from a strategic perspective and then use a methodology to assess military operations, which has been the primary approach, and then look at violent extremism in response, and then also look at the development, humanitarian, and socio-economic aspects that we've engaged in the past.
O objetivo é, em vez de dissecar os eventos ou a cronologia na qual eles aconteceram, o objetivo é medir o sucesso ou o não sucesso da evolução do conflito, aplicar uma metodologia específica para avaliar a trajetória dessas operações militares, a resposta que houve em relação dos extremistas a essas operações militares e, finalmente, aplicar uma metodologia que nos permite olhar para a situação atual e também olhar para o futuro.
Okay, we're going to try this side so we don't get any feedback. So let's apply this methodology that I've just spoken about to the situation last year, the situation now, and the situation in the future.
Para isso, como disse, vamos aplicar a metodologia para olhar para o que aconteceu no passado, o que está a acontecer agora e como olhar para o futuro.
Next slide, please. So, military responses. I do not have the experience of the general over many, many years, but I spent about 19, 20, 21 years in the military, so I have a little bit of knowledge about this. So, military trajectories are based on a series of different principles.
Eu não tenho a experiência militar dos oradores, mas tenho mais de 21 anos de experiência da Academia Militar, e o que vamos olhar primeiro são as trajetórias ao nível das respostas militares.
The first thing that we try to do in a military context is try to contain a problem. And we all know that, unfortunately, between 2017 and up until the middle of last year, that was a failed process. It's very difficult for the military and security forces of Mozambique to contain this problem. But with the assistance of Rwandese forces and with the assistance of SADC, that containment was achieved pretty much July, August last year, less some expansion of violent extremism into neighbouring provinces such as Nyasa.
O primeiro objetivo do ponto de vista militar é conter e parar a situação. Entre 2017 e 2021, de julho de 2021, não houve grandes progressos, mas graças ao sucesso das intervenções das forças de Ruanda e do SADC, temos visto uma evolução muito positiva, com alguns incidentes a estenderem-se para o Niassa,